After about 7.5 years of marriage and 2 years of trying to get pregnant, in late 2004, we found out that the Lord had blessed us with a pregnancy. And we actually found out early 2005 that we were going to have not one baby, but two. And it was going to be a boy and a girl, and we're just super excited. Marsha was having an amazing pregnancy, really experienced no morning sickness. Everything was going great. And then at 22 weeks, completely unexpectedly out of the blue, she wound up going into premature labor, and really no explanation for it. And thankfully, the doctors were able to keep the babies inside for another 4 weeks. And March 16th of 2005, we had twins born. Brexton, our son, was born first. He weighed in at a whopping 2 pounds 1 ounce. McKeely came out 1 minute later, and she weighed 1 pound 13 ounces. McKeely was our daughter. And really for the first few days they did pretty well. They kind of call that the honeymoon phase in the neonatal ICU. And at 5 days old, they ran a pretty routine test that they run on babies born that young, because it's a fairly common side effect for them to have brain hemorrhaging, a brain bleed. And if there is a brain hemorrhage, it can be a grade 1, which is fairly insignificant, all the way to a grade 4, which is the most severe type of brain hemorrhage. And so at 5 days old, both of them had CAT scans done, and the doctors took us into a separate room, sat us down, and gave us pretty bad news. They said that McKeely had a grade 3 hemorrhage on one side and a grade 4 hemorrhage on the other, and that Brexton had grade 4 brain bleeds on both sides. And in Brexton's case, they really recommended the offensive term comfort care of taking him off the vent and letting him die. But we were completely convinced that that's not what the Lord had for us. Romans 4 is a passage he gave us really when we got pregnant. And it's a passage we've clung to really for the past 6 years, but in it he says, "Against all hope, Abraham in hope believed, and so became the father of all nations, of many nations." And it just, in the worldly, we had no reason to hope. There's no way to fix it, to repair a brain bleed. There's no really hope for recovery. But against all hope, in hope, we chose to believe and feel like the Lord strengthened us to do that. So we said no, we'd rather keep him alive, and kind of went from there. About 2 weeks later, they redid the CAT scans to see how they progressed, and if it continued to hemorrhage and all that stuff. And with McKeely, we really feel like we got an instant miracle, because 2 weeks later they redid the tests and came back with no evidence of her having had a brain bleed. So 5 days old, it's worst case on one side and almost worst case on the other side of her brain. A couple weeks later, there's no evidence, and actually at 6 months old, they did an MRI, which is kind of the best picture they could take at the time, and could see no evidence of there ever having been a brain bleed. And so we're thankful for that. Now she's a 6-year-old, a little tall for her age, normal little girl. You'd never even know she was a preemie. Just the picture of health, really. Brexton, his hadn't progressed any further, but he still was showing a grade 4 bleed on both sides. So after an extended stay in the NICU, the neonatal ICU, at about 3 months old, Brexton a little before 3 months old, and McKeely a little after 3 months old, we were finally able to bring both of them home. And we kind of adjusted to what life looked like at that point. So McKeely again was really on the road to being completely normal. Brexton had some pretty severe limitations. He couldn't hold his head up, couldn't roll over, couldn't sit up on his own, was physically pretty severely limited, but mentally he was really all there. Communicated fully through facial expression and eye gaze, and just had this joy about him, this infectious smile that he could just light up a room with, and mentally again all there, physically really limited, and so we just helped him do everything. Everything his sister did, he wanted to do, and our back may be hurting, but we were going to make sure that he got an opportunity to do it, and and that kind of became life around our house. So we brought him home in June of 2005, and then in August of 2006, the twins were down for a nap and sleeping well, not really making any noise, and the Lord just really kind of prompted Marsha to go in and peek in on them and see how they were doing. And she peeked in, and Brexton was really having a difficulty in breathing, and had blue lips and blue fingertips, just was not getting enough oxygen. So we called 911, and they came out and were able to get him on oxygen and rushed him down to the hospital. And after about 3 days of tests and poking and prodding and really trying to figure out what was wrong, determined that from all the times he had a breathing tube down his throat as a newborn, it had caused scar tissue to build up in his airway, and so his airway was just really narrow, and so any congestion or any sickness really kind of closed off his airway. So at 15 months old, a little over, I guess, maybe 16 months old, in August of 2006, Brexton got a trach put in. And that was a really difficult transition for us. It's a whole nother life. Anybody who's going to take care of him and help us with him has to have a whole new set of training. The trach is below his vocal cords, so you can't hear him cry, you can't hear him laugh. He's completely, can't even make noise at that point other than through the trach itself. And so it's a big adjustment. Everywhere you go, you got to take suction, and there's the stares from people and all that. And it was really a hard transition for us to make, and hard for us to kind of get used to that. And it was shortly after that, a couple months later in October, that we went to a healing service at our church. And at that, the Lord did a lot of healing in Marsha and I, for sure. But the other thing that he did there was he gave us something to stand on. Somebody came up to us and just said that the Lord had really prompted them to share a message with us, and they had written it down, and we've read it so many times that we both have it committed to memory. But she said that your little one will have a great testimony of healing. I saw him standing on a stage at 6 or 7 years old, proclaiming the healing that the Lord did in his body. The Lord will give him a platform to share his testimony. He'll be completely healed and whole. And then she quoted